Upon the death of Pharaoh Alexander, the high priest of Karnak declared his own daughter the rightful heir. To strengthen her claim, he bound her in marriage to the son of Cleomenes of Naucratis, a youth said to have once fought a crocodile and won. Together they rose in rebellion. They drove Ptolemy from Egypt and in secret gave aid to his rivals in the wars of the Diadochi. When Ptolemy returned to reclaim the Nile, Egypt was no longer weak. Its armies had been reformed, its weapons sharpened, its people united. The Greeks were defeated and the son of Cleomenes took the double crown as Pharaoh Nesut-Amun I. Kingdoms rose, kingdoms fell, yet the dynasty of Nesut-Amun endured. From Thebes they ruled for centuries. The priesthood was absorbed into the royal family itself, while dynastic marriage secured powerful allies. Most famous of all was the union between an Egyptian princess and the heir of the most powerful family in Carthage. When Rome rose to challenge the Mediterranean, it stood against not one enemy, but many: Carthage, Egypt, the League of Corinth, and their allies. 12 years of war followed. In the end, Rome was destroyed. Carthage razed to the ground, salted its fields, and poisoned its waters. Yet Egypt gained the most. Its armies remained strong, its wealth untouched. With Pharaoh's blessing, the Carthaginian Republic gave way to an imperial dynasty. But this too proved dangerous. For when the first Carthaginian emperor died, his nephew turned on Egypt. A vast Punic fleet sailed up the Nile, sacked Thebes and looted its temples. The pharaoh barely escaped with his life. But Carthage could not hold the Nile. Egypt rose again, and though the invaders tried many times, they were always repelled. To reclaim his honor, the pharaoh built a navy of his own, spending vast amounts of grain and gold to bring timber from across the Aegean. With this fleet, Egypt struck at the heart of Carthage. For 3 years the city was starved, its trade cut, its walls surrounded. At last the gates fell. But Egypt did not destroy Carthage. Instead, the pharaoh cast down its dynasty, a dynasty with Egyptian blood in its veins, and restored the Senate to power. Egypt had come as a liberator, not a conqueror. The price of liberation was simple. Egypt will take the lands of fallen Rome, while Hispania was left to Carthage. The League of Corinth was reformed under Athens after defeating Sparta in civil war, renamed itself Biathena Kratos, and with arrogant pride declared itself the most advanced civilization in the world. With its democracy, its republic, and its growing wealth, it even dared to meddle in Canaan, a land that had long paid tribute to Egypt. Egypt's answer was swift. The pharaoh conquered Canaan outright, holding it as a buffer against Hellenic Anatolia. But the insult remained. The pharaoh longed to bring Athens itself to heel. Yet endless conflict along the eastern frontier with the Parthian Empire kept Egypt from turning its armies west. The struggle dragged on for generations. In the western region of her empire, Egypt reclaimed the ruins of Rome and rebuilt the city in the image of Thebes. The pharaoh gave governance of the new Rome to his second son, dividing the empire across the Mediterranean, a kingdom in the east, a kingdom in the west, bound only by sea. But Egypt's strength was stretched thin. Constant border wars with the Parthians and trade wars with Athens and Carthage, which often spilled into open battle, drained her armies, and in this unrest, something new arose. From Canaan spread a strange religion, the faith of a man who claimed to be the Son of God. Slowly, quietly, it took root. And when Egypt at last triumphed over the Parthian and Anatolian alliance, the pharaoh of the age declared his own conversion. The decision split the empire. In defiance, the Western Egyptian realm declared itself independent, crowning its own pharaoh, Amun XII. Thebes struck back, but every attempt to reclaim the West failed. Instead, the Eastern pharaoh lashed out in fury, waging war on all neighbors, on Anatolia, on Byzantium, on Parthia, and later on the Caliphate. Meanwhile, in the West, Amun XII sought to prove his dynasty the true heir of Egypt. To this end, he began the greatest building project of his age, the citadel of Waset Ra. It was no mere fortress, it was a symbol, a blending of temple and palace, of religion and empire. Great pillars rose with arches and soaring ceilings. A grand processional stairway climbed from the river to the hilltop, lined with ceremonial columns and flanked by rows of sphinxes. At its gate, two colossal statues waited, Amun I and Amun XII, seated upon their thrones, bearing the twin scepter of spirit and power, with the flames of Ra burning between them. Beyond the gates stretched a labyrinth of halls and courtyards. The great throne room, the largest hall ever built in the world, where the pharaohs sat as both king and high priest, and beside it the hall of plenty, vast enough to host nobles and commoners alike, where the pharaoh dined with his people beneath a ceiling of gold and marble. Under the fervor of the new religion, Theban Egypt expanded its dominion further than ever before. Armies marched deep into Anatolia in the north and south into Mecca, forcing both obedience and conversion. Even Byzantium, proud and defiant, was brought to its knees, spared only when its ruling council embraced the new faith. Only Carthage resisted, united with the so-called true heir of Egypt, the Western Roman branch of the dynasty. They split the Mediterranean into two, a wall of ships and armies standing between them and Thebes. The transformation of Egypt was absolute. In the great temples of Thebes, the ancient gods were torn down, their image destroyed, their murals plastered over. What remained was not statues or paintings, but only an idea. When news reached the West, Roman Egypt wailed. They vowed vengeance to reclaim and restore true Egypt. But their attention was drawn elsewhere. From the north came the barbaric raiders, the Gauls who pillaged and burned without mercy. To protect the heartland, Roman Egypt pushed its frontier ever northwards until it reached the northern seas. This expansion brought them into contact with new people, new cultures, and endless wars, but the core of Roman Egypt was preserved, and its capital, New Thebes, grew into the largest city west of the Nile, even surpassing the grandeur of Carthage. 3 concentric walls encircle it, with processional avenue running through its heart. Yet the true drama unfolded at Waset Ra. While the citadel was still under construction, the royal family had already moved into the half-finished halls. There, Pharaoh Amun XII was found dead in his chambers, his body mummified on the very bed he had last laid. He had not been seen in months. His steward, it was revealed, had accidentally poisoned him with too much medicine, and in fear of punishment, concealed his death, ruling Egypt in the pharaoh's name. When the truth came out, the steward was tied to a horse and dragged through the streets until his face was stripped from his skull. The new pharaoh who followed would live long, but never again show his face. From his coronation onward, He shrouded himself completely in white silk, appearing only rarely, always covered from head to toe. Some whispered of disease, others of madness. His reign was remembered for its stability, but his person became a mystery. His son, born before the covering, inherited at the age of 40, and his rule was marked by peace. But peace did not last long. His successor, known as the Red Pharaoh, would face an age of turmoil. Theban Egypt fell into civil war. The caliphate re-emerged only to be swept away by plague. Byzantium rose, conquering all of Anatolia, but plague halted its advances as well. In Byzantium, Sparta rose to power, condemning Athens for surrendering to a foreign god, and razed the city to the ground. In the west, the Gaul broke through the frontier and even breached the walls of New Thebes. Only the fortress of Waset Ra held firm, sparing the city from destruction. The Red Pharaoh struck back with fire and fury, driving the Gauls not only from Egypt, but across Hispania and into Germania. By the end of his reign, Roman Egypt had doubled its lands, its borders stretching farther than ever before. He died on campaign, an old man returning to New Thebes in triumph, remembered as a pharaoh who turned back the barbarians and carved an empire from chaos. By the end of the Red Pharaoh's reign, a new ruler rose in Roman Egypt, the Green Pharaoh. His rule marked a time of great transformation. The city of New Thebes no longer resembled the murals of old. Intermarriages with foreign people and the blending of culture for convenience and for war had created a population distinct from their ancestors. Even their garments looked different, a living testament to change. The great pharaoh himself had grown up on the battlefield beside his father. He expanded the empire, not only with conquest, but with diplomacy, turning border kingdoms into vassal states, promising them protection under Egypt's banner. Carthage, meanwhile, faltered. Its empire declined, and Roman Egypt pressed deeper into Hispania. Yet the cost of holding it grew too great, as kingdoms of the new religion no longer traded with Carthage, cutting its wealth away piece by piece. The citadel of Waset Ra now stood as the meeting place of kings and lords, allies and enemies alike. Once a Gaul vassal king died after tumbling down the fortress steps. It might have sparked rebellion, but his successor calmed the unrest. Later it was discovered the dead king had been murdered, pushed by his own man, bribed by the new ruler. The Green Pharaoh did nothing. For peace, even murder could be ignored. To the east, Byzantium, long ruled by Sparta's iron hand, fell to elites loyal to the new religion, aided by the Pope in Jerusalem. Theban Egypt, weakened and fragmented, soon found itself bound to the same papacy, its power depending on divine favor. The new religion spread unchecked, reaching even towards the Indus. Roman Egypt might have marched to reclaim Thebes, but by now it saw itself as the spiritual heart of Egypt, and the great pharaoh would not risk provoking the Pope, for when the papacy declared holy war, the petty states of the world rallied like wolves, tearing down their prey with savage fury. The Green Pharaoh married his cousin, the first such union in the line of Neferti. Of their children, only one survived to adulthood, a fragile daughter named Cleopatra. Fearing the fate of kingdoms without a male heir, the pharaoh raised her to rule beside him, enshrining into law that any child born of her line would remain of the house of Neferti. When the Green Pharaoh died, Cleopatra was already established as a regent, and so she ascended with power firmly in hand, the first female pharaoh of Roman Egypt. Her reign was one of stability and growth. She expanded the citadel of Waset Ra into a vast complex, enlarged the great temple beside it, and fortified Egypt's northern frontier against the creeping advance of the new faith. While Theban Egypt dissolved into the theocratic papacy of Jerusalem, Roman Egypt endured, its empire assimilating countless people. Women here were warriors, governors, and rulers. Taxes built roads and aqueducts and cities. And yet one mystery lingered. The pharaoh's husband was never named, never recorded. He appeared in no art, in no inscription. In images, Cleopatra was always alone, sovereign in her own right, or depicted only as a mother with her 5 children at her side. Thus, Roman Egypt entered its golden age, under the reign of a queen remembered simply as Pharaoh Cleopatra, mother of empires. Pharaoh Cleopatra lived to the age of 68. By her death, she was remembered as the forever monarch, yet she was not succeeded by her eldest son, for he had died in a cruel accident, thrown from his horse and trampled under its hoof. His line survived through 2 sons and a daughter. Cleopatra had favored the daughter and enshrined into law the firstborn, no matter their gender, would inherit the throne. Thus the crown passed to the princess Neferti Nesut-Amun, who, like her grandmother before her, had ruled first as regent. But unlike Cleopatra, Pharaoh Nefertiti inherited not a world of hope but one of fire. Within a year of her ascension, the papacy of Jerusalem declared a holy war upon Roman Egypt. She was condemned as a harlot, a woman unfit to inherit the earth, a sovereign who ruled with demons, and so the kingdoms of the new religion rose against her with unholy zeal. In the great halls of Waset Ra, Nefertiti summoned her council, her generals, and her people. She declared before all, "The papal horde is a beast that brings only plague and ruin. Every man and every woman must rise to defend their children, their freedom, their right to inherit, their right to love. We will not bend, we will fight to the last." And the empire answered. The papal host poured into the empire from the east of Germania, from the coast of the Mediterranean. They came in waves without end. They fought on water, they fought on land, and they died by the thousands. Still they came, and still they fell. Nefertiti herself sent forth a fleet, a swift armada armed with fire ballistae, striking papal ports with flames before vanishing back into the sea. Proper Egypt, the granaries of the papacy, was razed by the armada and burned its harvest, denying the invaders their bread. The fiercest defenders were the women warriors of the north. They rose as commanders, even generals, and their ferocity turned the tide. In Waset Ra, the pharaoh defied the pope openly and out of spite, hosting a marriage celebration of her younger sister with a lady of a vassal. Enraged, the Pope decreed the expulsion of all non-believers from the Holy Land. The last Hebrews were driven from the city, some finding refuge in New Thebes. The papacy had replaced the pharaohs of Thebes with its so-called divine ruler, but it could not command its many different armies. Waves after waves of its hordes failed. They held no city, no lands. Within 16 years, the crusade had broken apart, reduced to little more than desperate raids, and most humiliating of all, they were defeated again and again by women. The sun on the empire of Roman Egypt did not set, not in a siege of glory. It waned slowly, its sun setting with a sigh of time. The citadel of Waset Ra stands as it has stood for centuries, even now in the year 6,266. Hi, so I am trying out a new thing with my content. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you would comment That will help out a lot with the algorithm. And if you would like to download the Word file, you can go to my Patreon, link in the description below. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.